Hey, friend. Welcome to Ediscover-Tea, from critique to change, sharing stories and expanding possibilities for the future of work in e-discovery, a podcast that brews up positivity and progress. I'm Becky, and along with my co-conspirators, Renee and Jill, we're here to pour out practical advice and inspiring conversations that illuminate what's really happening out in e-discovery land. In each episode, we'll uncover the truths and realities of e-discovery, shining a light on what's working, what needs improvement, and how we can drive meaningful change from the grassroots level. Our goal is to inform, uplift, and empower you with insights and strategies. Together, we can create a movement towards a more innovative, compassionate, and effective legal landscape. So grab your favorite cup, sit back, and let's infuse your day with positive energy and actionable wisdom. This is Ediscover-Tea. Hey. Hi, friend.
Hi.
Hi. What's up?
Hey.
So excited to be here.
Me too.
Yeah. This is going to be fun. This is a series that we are planning to record when the mood strikes us. But we have lots of topics and ideas. So, I think this is the beginning of a fun journey for us. That said, why don't we get it started and have each of you introduce yourselves, how you ended up in e-discovery, and probably end that with like, what is your relationship status with e-discovery?
Mm, 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 mm. Who's going first? Jill, you want to go first? You want me to go
Okay,
first?
yeah, I'll go first.
Mhm.
Well, my journey with e-discovery and the legal industry generally started in maybe 2002 when I entered law school. So I went to law school at SUNY Buffalo, and I really had an intention when I went into law school to do like human rights law or civil rights law, building off of the education that I had at the University of Dayton. But things happened. So I went through law school, I came back to Columbus and had trouble finding a job. That was around 2005. And a friend of mine from law school had moved to DC and gotten a contract attorney job. And I was like, what is that? And I think those who are familiar with e-discovery know contract attorneys are kind of like the engine that runs the review process. And so I was like, well, that's interesting. I can go do that and it pays pretty well. And let's see what happens. And so I signed up with one of the e-discovery or one of the review companies. And they called me in like 3 days and were like, we're starting a project in like 2 days. Can you be here? And so I moved from Columbus to the DC area and started into my career with e-discovery. So I did contract attorney work for about a year and a half. And then I was hired permanently as a staff attorney at Arnold and Porter in Washington, D.C. And I was sort of running reviews, mostly antitrust work. So like mergers and things like that, CIDs, those types of cases. I was working on that for quite a while. I think I did that for about 5 years. And then I transitioned fully onto the vendor side of e-discovery and started as a project manager. And I did that until really I left in 2019. So it was about 7 years or so that I was working specifically in the e-discovery vendor space in a client-facing role as a project manager and later as an associate director. I worked for a few different companies. Some of them transitioned while I was there through acquisitions. So I've had experience at both small shops and big shops. And I just really felt like when I got close to the end of my time in e-discovery that I really wanted to shift into work that felt good to me, that felt like I was contributing to the world, that felt like I was making a difference in some way, that I was helping people, kind of taking me back to the place where I started, which is I really wanted to be in work that was like, focused on humanity and uplifting humanity. And I didn't find that really in the legal field. So In 2019, I left, I walked away. I didn't have anything lined up. I didn't know what I was going to do. And so I started my journey of kind of carving out my own path. And during that time, from 2019 till now, I have done some consulting work in e-discovery, and my friends looked out for me. So I've had some opportunities to do some, consulting work, doing documentation and training, things like that for e-discovery companies. But it's an on and off thing. So I would say my relationship status with e-discovery is we're kind of in the friend zone at this point. Like, I'm not sure that we're getting back together. It's possible, who knows? But right now, we're definitely seeing other people, and I don't know if we're getting out of the friend zone. What about you, Renee? Well, tell us about your start in e-discovery or in the legal field.
Okay. Well, um, I started way back in 2005-ish. Took a job as a paralegal coming out of uh, undergrad. Um, I went to Queens College and I took grade school in New York. And after I got my BA, I went back to get a paralegal certificate. And at the time, the program was fairly new. You could get like a government grant to take it. It was that new, right? And I took an accelerated course, graduated, and about 2002, I got my first job. But I want to say like it was 2005 when I had a really good job. Paralegal, I felt comfortable doing the work. And I went from litigation paralegal to senior litigation paralegal at a couple big firms in New York. Then I settled at a boutique firm, loved them, Friedman Kaplan, and I loved working for them. Stayed there for about 5 years and ended up having to move around for personal reasons. And worked in Florida, worked in maritime law, worked in antitrust. Got a lot, like a really big uh, uh, variety of different kinds of cases that I got to work on. And then I ended up at CBS in the corporate department. Loved that too, but um, e-discovery. Someone called me and was like, "What do you think about e-discovery? Maybe you want to take a job as a PM. We have this opportunity at this huge shop. You can learn it from the ground up." And I thought, what's e-discovery? And ended up going to a fairly big shop. They were starting to transition out of a startup. They were starting to get pretty big in the industry. I stayed there for 10 years. They ended up becoming, one of the mammoth, big four. And I cut my teeth there, really learned a lot there. Um, and I ended up going to another mid-sized shop, learned a lot there, good people. And then it occurred to me as I got older and, learned a little bit more about how this machine runs, that technology kept just evolving and growing, and everything started to get easier in terms of how to process data, how to get the client experience, a lot more efficient. But there was very little done about like how to make people's lives at the job happier, right, and easier. And I wanted to throw my hat in the ring to build a team based on wellness and see how that worked, proving that you can have a team of people that you encourage to put themselves first and the company can still make money. Who knew? And I got an opportunity to do that at a smaller shop, and I did that for a couple of years. And I have been out of the industry now for about a month. So I'd say my relationship with e-discovery is complicated. Not sure if we're going to get back together either. Um, I'm a little hopeful, but right now, I'm just trying to heal from the complication.
Yeah, I think heal is a common thread when you're leaving the industry. Um, yes, and by the way, two of us are cat owners, so you may see special guest appearances from here and there. I mean,
They have
you can't control
absolutely no
cats,
manners.
so just deal with it, viewers. Um, uh, okay, thanks for sharing. Okay, so I'll go last. So I'm Becky Wiley, by the way. I started in my career. I've done a couple of different careers. So straight out of high school and through college, I worked at Verizon Wireless. I sort of worked my way through several different roles, from sales to client success, things like national accounts. And then when Jill went off to law school, she started to talk to me about the things she was studying, and I got really interested. And so I then attended Columbus State Community College. I'm very proud of that. It's a great community college here in Columbus. They do a lot with the community, including Columbus public school kids being able to go there for free. So I'm always proud to say that. Um, I got a 2 year associate's degree in paralegal studies. And from there, I went on to get an entry level legal investigator and slash paralegal job with the city of Columbus, city attorney's office. I then from there, I went on to try corporate work, which was not my jam. Also tried private practice. I worked in a law firm that did FDA law, also not my jam. I ended up back in public service, which is really one of my first loves. I finished my bachelor's degree in business administration at the same time as I went on to work for the state of Ohio and then for the Ohio State University. In that last role in public service, I was a paralegal and program manager for the Public Records Office, but I also supported a Title IX office. And, you know, for me, having two or three separate roles within one job was like, my dream. And really, the only reason I ended up in Ediscovery is because my boss at the time at Ohio State was retiring, and I was ready for a new challenge. So Jill hooked me up. I I had no experience, but my background in managing public records requests, high volume of, work, talking to people, corresponding with people. I had a lot of the basic skill sets to go into e-discovery. So I went in, and within 8 years, I went from basically what is like a junior PM or maybe an associate PM to a senior PM. And then from there, I left working in a vendor side and joined my sister in our business and did a little bit of consulting work, documentation, things like that. And then also, doing some part-time like project management, but really with a focus in like training, mentoring, documenting processes, and sort of guiding and leading, younger and less seasoned PMs. So I would say I broke up with eDiscovery, but eDiscovery didn't break up with me. And so it's been sort of like a thing where eDiscovery pursues me and I keep saying no, thank you. But eDiscovery is my backup plan. I'm not afraid to say that. I ever see myself going back? It has to be the right setup. It has to be the right setup. And usually that would be, um, you know, working for someone who sees, what I have to offer. So yeah, that's my story. So I guess maybe like backtracking a little bit. We probably are going to have some friends and family maybe who watch this and are like, I have no idea what you did for all those years. So maybe we should like give a brief overview of what e-discovery actually is. Um,
I can take a stab at that.
yeah.
I can tell
Okay.
you that if you do your Googles, which is something my sister and I say now, Google doesn't know what e-discovery is either, which is adorable. But essentially, I mean, it tries to explain what ESI is, but there's no real concrete definition. What I'll say is, um, in in any kind of litigation or, situation where people are suing each other, um, the both sides have to share information, and that information now, with the complex ways that people speak to each other through chats and, you know, email and other kinds of collaboration data and X and freaking Facebook and all kinds of other things. Um, it, 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 it could be a very complicated process to gather that kind of information so that parties can share information between each other, in sort of a way to support whatever their argument is for their client. So e-discovery essentially is a way to use technology to gather information that can be shared between parties. That information used to just be paper. Now it can be basically anything. It can be anything on your phone. It could be anything in your, Google Drive. It can be anything. And um, the practice of e-discovery is really about trying to make that process easy for the people that are reviewing the data. So using analytics and other ways to find the needle in the haystack as quickly and efficiently as possible, hopefully also as cost effective as possible. So that's what makes the job kind of fun. I can say that why I stayed in it for, and I don't think I mentioned this in the intro, been doing this for 16 years. And 16 years in a client-facing role, always in project management. Something about working for any kind of project where the folks on the other side are smart, right? You got attorneys, some big shops, some big firms, some small firms, but all of them have a job to do for some other person or entity. And sometimes you get to know or meet those people involved, and sometimes you don't. But what's clear all the time is that they need help, right? Because this stuff is a little complicated. Um, and they have to practice law, and you want to make the job of the technical piece easier so that they don't have to be burdened with that complexity. So it can be kind of cool putting those puzzle pieces together. And I can say I wouldn't have stayed in it for 16 years if it wasn't enjoyable in some way, shape, or form. And it's also like a really great way to earn a living. I think for kids coming up, it's nice to be in a position to take what I've learned over the past 16 years to really help people understand how to be in this industry and be safe and know how to get through it and keep their head and those kinds of things. But ultimately, yeah, it's helping people, which I think is interesting, the way we all met, right? Just being like-minded in the pursuit of helping people and helping each other through teamwork. I remember the day I met Becky, and I remember the day I met Jill. I didn't know you guys were sisters, which uh, uh, didn't surprise me when I finally figured it out. But yeah, I don't know if you guys want to talk about that, but I remember meeting you both, and the first time I spoke to Jill, I went to help Jill on a project with a really big client, and I remember she explained something to me, that she was having a challenge with this client, and she was like, "This is so complicated, so I'm gonna explain it to you." And I was like, "Okay, yeah, I got it. So I'm gonna do this, that, and the other." She's like, "You got that in 5 minutes?" And I've been trying to explain that for her for the longest time. And I was like, "Yep, we're gonna get along." It was a good moment.
That's funny that that's the first thing you remember. The first thing I remember about you is you started when we first started working together. You started when we were at a summit at an
Oh
all
yeah.
company, right? Like
Yep.
everybody had flown to the mothership, as one of my friends used to call it, the mothership. Everybody had flown to that city. You started like that week. And I remember we were at like an all hands meeting, and you were sitting like someplace like, by yourself. And I saw you and I was like, come here. Like I knew you were like my new coworker, but I was like, come sit with us. Here's a seat here. That's the first thing I remember about meeting you. And I actually love that's how I remember the start of our relationship.
That day was
this,
so overwhelming.
yeah,
It
no
was my
doubt.
first day too. When my first week, it was my first day.
Yeah.
I was like,
And
look
it's
at this
like,
party they gave for me. How nice.
yeah. And like, I imagine it would have been like really overwhelming because there's so much energy when everybody finally gets together. When, like, a lot of, I mean, every company I've worked for in the e-discovery space was basically remote workers, right? There might be some people working in a corporate office somewhere, but most of the team was remote all over the country. And so there's so much energy that gets generated when everybody's finally together. These people you're like in the trenches with, and you get to like see and spend time with and have drinks with and like go out and whatever, that like coming in as a new person in that situation must be really like tough. But yeah, that was our first, like, that's what I remember as our meet cute, if you will.
Oh, how awesome. How awesome. I still
And
have a picture of me.
I feel like this, did you have her come sit with us? I think you and
Pro-
I were
I mean,
sitting
you're
with
probably,
probably with our friend Lori.
Yes.
I don't know who,
I have
yeah.
I actually have a picture like of that meeting of me and Renee and I think Lori.
Agreed. It's wonderful.
Yeah. So the elephant in the room is that e-discovery is really hard. It's really hard. It is it can be challenging, it can be maddening, it can be depressing. It can be all of those things. And we're not really going to get into those tough topics here with our first episode. But of course, we want to talk about real things. I think we've all experienced working in places that just want to turn the other cheek. And we are people who believe that we should, attack things head on and figure out what's at the root and how can we fix it. So, that being said, I will say like there's a reason we all stayed in e-discovery for as long as we did. And, I think a lot of it has to do with the people, because there's some so like smart and amazing and eclectic and like multi-talented. Like I have never worked with a cooler group of people like brought together at the same time. So I don't know, like for me, that's what kept me coming back. I don't know about, Jill, or you guys, like, I don't know if you guys felt the same way, but for me, it was the people. Not necessarily the technology is exciting or whatever. The pace of things, I think, when I was younger was fun, but it's really for me. It was the people. This is the people.
Yes, I think all the time, like, I can't quit you. Like, I can't, I, there is something about this industry. It's not the work. Well, we can talk about the work. I mean, my position will be that the work is the problem, but it's not the work that I'm connected to. It's the people. It's like that I was able to walk away from it and like I'm surviving, right? And I see people who are still stuck in it and they're hurting and they're suffering. And I feel maybe it's a sense of no, it's not obligation. I don't know what it is. I should think about this a little bit more, right? Like, what is it that makes me continue to come back and want to try to like help people in e-discovery? And it's not me going back in myself, right? Like, there's something about having like walked away, found my own path, found healing, found well-being that makes me want to turn around and say, hey, this is possible for you too. And now I'm at a place where I feel like it's been 5 years. I feel like I'm finally ready to say, let me show you how I did it. Let me show you what's possible. Let me talk to you about some ideas that I have. I'm not an expert. This is a huge problem, right? Like, the culture of e-discovery is not that different than corporate culture generally. It's just, this is what we're focused on. This is our lived experience. But I really want to like dive head on from the outside and say, like, here are some ideas. Like, let's talk about these things. Who wants to have a conversation? And see what the response is, right? Because my desire to help and to support people has not left me. If anything, it's gotten stronger over the last couple of years.
It's wonderful. Yeah. I mean, I feel that so deeply, Joe. it's it's kind of like I suspect folks who have been at war together, have that shared experience as a veteran, and only veterans can really truly understand what that experience is like, you know, in talking to each other. I can listen, but I wouldn't really get it. I feel the same way with e-discovery, and it's sad that I'm comparing it to war, but it can be very emotionally draining, because you're always on, right? And that that sort of um, traditional way to attack the business, your life is not your own. I remember when I started in this business, my first shop, I met this lovely woman. I'm not going to say her name, so I don't want to embarrass her, but she was a great boss. And when she interviewed me, she said that something about this job means that your life is not going to be your own. And I did not take her seriously then. That was 2008. And I remember it so vividly. And she works for a corporation now. And, so she's still sort of kind of in with the legal industry, but she's not doing this anymore. And it's interesting that all those people that I learned from, all those people who had already been in it for a couple of years, right, seem to be happiest when they are out, and that's a problem, right? And I know, we have always talked about these things, and I'm so happy that we're doing this podcast now, because I agree with you, Jill. People do want to talk about it, right? But they're afraid. They don't know where to start. They don't want to be blacklisted. They don't want potential employers to think that, they're not in it for the long haul. Couldn't be further from the truth, but there should never be any kind of conflict between you doing a great job at work and you being a great human being, being there for your children or your spouse or your pets or whatever it is that you do in your spare time, even if it's just sitting on the couch reading a book for your darn self. That should be okay. And for some employers, no, not all, but for some, it's not. They hold those kinds of things together, not directly, but indirectly, by sort of making it, what's the word I want? They're like, they celebrate too much those folks who work too much, right? We have a shared friend who had something happen in their family, and their child said to them, like, mommy's always working, and it crushed her, right? And that should not be your child's perception of you, right? If they turn around and ask you for something and you're like, just 5 more minutes because I got to get this email out, they're going to remember that. And, there's something about this industry that it shouldn't be that, right? We should be encouraging, especially when you get to a level where you're a leader. Um, you should be encouraging people to, like, okay, keep perspective. This is the job, but your family is your family. That's your number one, and figure out how to be efficient enough to do the job beautifully, but not sacrifice your actual life. And that's, most people struggle in this business. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because really, like, when it comes down to it, it's just a made up urgency half the time, or even more than half the time. And unfortunately, a lot of people either are not, do not feel empowered, or do not have any training or experience in pushing back and saying to a client, do you actually need this today? Or, can this wait till Monday? Because it's Friday. I mean, as a paralegal, I would experience this. Like, the attorneys I worked for would get all their stuff together and Friday afternoon come by my office and put it in my desk. And it's like they're clearing their desk for the weekend and they're moving it to my desk. Now, this was like in private or in public sector. So I knew that that meant Monday I had stuff to do, you know? But in e-discovery, that means, oh, you got to get this shit done now.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least people who are, either feel a lack of empowerment or have a lack of training don't understand that it's actually okay to respond back and ask them what their turnaround time. Most lawyers, most clients are flexible, right? Like most of the time, they can be reasonable. But there is a whole sector of people out there who believe that their work is more important and more urgent than curing cancer. And I just don't vibe with that. And I've never trained people to behave that way. Like, you have to be the steady, like, patient, calm, almost slow moving person to get everyone else around you to slow down. I remember teaching somebody I was mentoring, sort of the motto that I used to like chant to myself while I was, working in some like pit from hell on 50 different cases at the same time. Your urgency, is not mine, or I am impervious to your urgency. Like, I don't care. I understand it's urgent, but if I get into that urgent, like, energy, I start working frantically. And guess what? That's when I make mistakes. And that's when most people make mistakes because you have 50 things coming at you at the same time. And so, learning how to push back, learning how to prioritize, learning how to raise your hand when you're in over your head. Like those are things that are, if they're not taught, people learn by fire. So, yeah, a lot of hard lessons in how you move in
It's
e-discovery.
Oh, go ahead, Jill.
I was just gonna say it's so true, Becky. And I can remember, working with you, you're like, you came from the public sector, and so you had a better sense of like what is normal. You're like,
I worked in the courts, so I knew like
yeah, it's like
you get like 30, 45 days to file. Like
what's everybody freaking out about?
Right, exactly. Like there's dates.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
What are we talking about here?
But I did not, when I was in Ediscovery and I was a project manager, I, took a lot of pride in my work. I really wanted to do a good job. I was expected to do a good job. I was a high performer, an A player, if you will. And I did not have the tools that I needed to be able to push back, to be able to stand up for myself, to be able to stand up for my team. I did not have a sense of empowerment in that way. And so every time, you would counsel me like, Jill, like you have to stop, like pull back, pull back. I would say, I can't. And it was true. That was a real experience for me. And it is a real experience for a lot of people that they want to. They know it's unhealthy. They know the deadlines are made up, but they want to do a good job and they care deeply and they don't know how to not push themselves to the brink. I was one of those people. I burned out. I got out, right? That's basically what happened. But there's lots of people who are in it now, who have been in it for a long time, who have been in sustained burnout for a really long time, who don't feel, like you said, empowered or have the tools to be able to draw good boundaries. And that's not their fault. It wasn't my fault. It just is what it is. And I think that goes to sort of our bigger point, which is like the whole way in which e-discovery companies run, the work is the problem. You will hear me say that over and over again, right? It is not an individual failure. It wasn't my individual failure. It's not my boss's fault. It's just the way the system is churning. And so we have to try to make inroads there. But I want to be clear that like, if you can't put up boundaries, that is not your fault. Right?
No, not at all. It's behavior that's learned, right? It's
Yes.
conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
And you might hear me say this once in a while and might be controversial, but it feels culty, right?
Yes.
There's a lot of behavior that is just like in e-discovery, it is not uncommon for people to bond over the fact that like they haven't showered yet that day, right? I showed up to work. I haven't showered yet today. I haven't brushed my teeth. Oh, I haven't eaten. Oh my gosh, it's 2 o'clock. what did I miss breakfast? Like that's not normal, right?
Hmm.
That's
Right.
not a lot of people's experience. My sister goes to work every day. She has breakfast. You know, she's a social worker. She works in like tough part of St. Louis, and she has what I think is like more life and death kind of situations that she has to deal with every day, right?
Yep.
People who are displaced, kids who are, marginalized, all kinds of terrible things happening to them. That's what she's dealing with. Actual life and death, right?
Hmm.
Not you need your production at 2 o'clock instead of 1 o'clock. That doesn't call for, extreme panic or people having to go into anxiety attacks and be on medication or worse, start engaging in substance abuse because of the pressure of getting someone's production out an hour later than possible than they may have expected for any myriad of reasons. That doesn't necessarily mean someone's individual failure, and that's really the problem. It's this perception that again, you know, the and I think we should also kind of back up a little. The practice of e-discovery is kind of vast. There's all kinds of different departments that make e-discovery companies run, and our experience is, mostly from the vendor side. And I think that will speak a lot, in coming sessions or episodes about um, the vendor side of e-discovery, because that's what I know best. And while I have tons of experience at from the law firm side as a client, my most recent experience is on the vendor side, so that's what I'd focus on. And from that perspective, there are things that can be done to mitigate, right? Like Becky was saying, like you train them a little bit, but there are also business owners and leaders who don't believe in that, right? Who don't believe that training a client is a thing. And to that, I say, wow, the client experience is what they make it too, right? We don't like no vendor can have full um, control over how a client's experience is. If you got a subpoena in March and you give it to me in August, and it was, you were supposed to reply by August 1st and you sent it to me on August 5th, that's not like I can't panic over that, right? I have to look at it and be like, but I still have to help you, right? It's still my job to help you. So let's just and get it done. But if everybody's panicked, the work isn't going to get done right. So from project management, which is where we all came from, um, it's it's kind of important that we all stay calm. And I know we've all been in situations where everybody's panicked, your boss is panicked, leadership's panicked, everybody's panicked, and you can't get anything done correctly in the right frame of mind. And there's a bunch of people who have figured out how to work in that space, how to work in that extreme panic mode constantly. It is not healthy, right? That's like being a what functional alcoholic. You're like a functionally discovery, I don't even know what you call it, but I feel like there needs to be some kind of diagnosis because there's so many of us that have suffered through the same kinds of things. And Jill, you're right, the work is the problem. But I think that those folks are suffering too, right? The clients are suffering too. They don't have to put themselves through that, but they're conditioned as well. So like what we want to do here is just talk about it. Like, how do we just make it better for everybody? Because it's not just a vendor problem. It's not just a law firm problem. It's not even their end clients that's the problem, right? All of it is important. Is it as important as curing cancer? I don't, I don't, I don't know that. I would say no, but that's my opinion. I'm sure to the person who the case is about, it's very important, and they want us to, you know, do our best. I've had to work with attorneys. I've hired lawyers in my day, and I recall one incident where a dude was like, I'm switching firms right now. I'm completely overwhelmed, and I'm so sorry that I haven't gotten back to you. And I was like, it's cool, right? Whenever you get to it, because I don't want you to just help me with this thing. I want you to do it when you've slept and you've eaten and you're happy, because you're going to do a better job. And it should just
Mm.
be that way, right? A humanity, like just come from a space of humanity so that we can all get back to helping people with a pure heart. Because when you're panicked like that, your heart's not pure, and that's just not going to be good work or a good experience for anyone.
Yeah, I think the going back to like anxiety, it will I swear everybody that we've worked with has had anxiety. Like every single person that I think about, like either they were actually diagnosed or to me you know, they showed some symptoms like people who aren't very nice when they're under a lot of pressure. Even with internal. I think that was probably one of the biggest challenges for me is trying to understand why somebody I am working with as a colleague in the same company would be rude or, abusive or like out of pocket. Just don't talk to me like that. Like, and me personally, like, I'm a very kind, sweet person. However, do not cross me. I have a very strong will, and I am going to go to the ends of the earth to help you if you are kind and respectful towards me. But if you are rude and you treat me, what I deem to be disrespectfully, like we're going to have some problems. We're going to have some problems. And I'm not, and we've talked about this, like it's not my job to coddle everyone. Like you're a grown adult, and if you can't recognize that you're under pressure and you might be like acting a little bit out of pocket and basically saying to somebody like, I'm under a lot of pressure right now. I need to step away and take like a quick walk, get some air, whatever. Like I can't be on a phone call. I need to process this and then come back. Like if you can't recognize that about yourself and you allow yourself to like go from like a very stressful situation to hop on a call where you're, hearing bad news or talking about how you have to deliver bad news and you start snapping at people you work with, like you're actually the problem. So learn how to moderate your own nervous system. I don't know what else to tell you, but I'm going to be kind up until the point you stop being kind to me. So I don't know. Like I think for me, that was one of the biggest things that pushed me out of the industry was not necessarily the clients. It was how people internally behaved towards each other. Because I'm no spring chicken, and this was like my third career, and so I've worked in high paced, even like working at Verizon. Like I worked there for 10 years, and I never saw people behave that way towards each other. At Ohio State, I don't know. If you're not from Ohio, you don't know, but Ohio State's like, that's the cream of the crop. Like everybody wants to work there, like especially in Columbus. The people there are just the kindest people I've ever worked with. And they had this whole phrase when I first started there that was like people would joke about it, but it was like everybody had something on their desk, like a little like thing, and it was be here now. And it was talking about being present and really being thoughtful and how you engaged with people you worked with. And that always stuck with me. So, yeah, I don't know if you guys have had that same experience, but I think for me it was the behavior of the people I worked with or for that bothered me the most.
I kind of hate the whole crap rolls downhill excuse for
Oh,
bad behavior. I think that um, from a project management perspective, what always bothered me was the lack of respect, right? Um, there's, I'm sure there's a lot of pressure having to litigate a case. And I know that the law firm pressure is rough. I've been in it, I've seen it. And I know that conditioning is hard to break. When I was a paralegal, I'm sure I was a terrible client because I was conditioned to believe that the vendors were, you know, beneath us and need to do what we say. And I regret a lot of the ways that I spoke to people at vendors back then in the early 2000s, right? And then when I ended up at one and was like, oh crap, shoot, did she just talk to me that way? Like it woke me up like, dag, I need, I had to check myself. And it's because I have I had reformed my own self, right? As an adult, it's what you do, you look at yourself, if you have something to change, you change it. It's for the better, for the greater good, whatever, right? Um, I reformed. I learned what it was like to be on the other side and was like, dag, this is not the way I want to live. And then just put good out into the world. That's the goal. And it made me, and my experience with all of the project managers that I ended up working with and the bosses I worked for, like it was a great experience with the people. But that lack of respect continues 16 years later. And that just, it bugs me. I feel like that's the core problem. And just, the way the business comes in, all of the the focus on sales and those kinds of relationships that people are so keen on and so enamored with at the start of a project. But what keeps the train moving, what keeps the money coming in, are the people who get abused the most, and there's just nobody doing anything about that. It bugs me. We got to do better.
It is interesting. It's like, I find it interesting just listening to all of our perspectives because like each of us has had our own experience in this industry, and each of us are able to sort of like dial into what we perceive to be like the problems in the industry, right? And I think, Renee, like, you reflected that, the switchover, right, was kind of like an eye opener for you. And I definitely look back on some things that I did while I was in it. Um, Maybe how I treated other people or things that I said like along the way that I do regret, right? Like there are things that I wish I could have done differently. But I think if we want to take a compassionate approach to this conversation, which I think is super important, then we have to sort of give ourselves grace. And that's true for everybody, right? Like saying, I have made a mistake here, or I haven't been on my best behavior, or maybe I said something that hurt somebody, or maybe I've been too demanding, or maybe I've been a real asshole. To recognize that, like, okay, maybe I was just doing the best that I could, right? Maybe it wasn't good enough. Maybe it did hurt people, but maybe I didn't know how to do better, right? And if you can allow yourself that grace, then there's a path forward to like changing behavior. Then you don't have to be defensive. Then you can just admit, right, that shit happens, and it's like the culture and the environment like has a way with us that kind of takes us out of our natural heart-centered way of being and puts us into something that maybe is not so great for everybody. But when we can admit that, I think, and like be honest, but give ourselves grace, then we can say, okay, here, how can I change this? Like what small changes, what small shifts can I make, right? And for me, like when I reflect on it, and like to be clear, I did have a bad experience in e-discovery. Like I don't want to go back. I mean, it was really bad for my health, for my physical health, for my mental health, for my emotional health. It was not a fun experience for me. And I always had amazing bosses and amazing coworkers. I always worked with people who cared about me. For the most part, like I have this something about my aura, like people do not mess with me. Like they just don't mess with me. I don't know why that is. I don't know. It's like maybe I don't know what it is. I don't experience a lot of like the like some of the things that Becky talked about, I know some of the things that you've gone through, Renee, too. I don't experience that in the same way. And yet, I had a terrible experience that was bad for me, bad for my well being, and bad for my family, frankly, right? It was bad for all my relationships. So we can hold all of those truths at the same time. And when we can, I think, really reflect on like what the situation is from a compassionate perspective, we can see that like it's not any one person's fault, right? Like there's a culture, there's a energy to the way that this industry is operating that is bad for like most people. And so what do we do about that? Like, and that is, I think, is my intention to have these conversations with the two of you, because I think we are sharing a similar point of view, or sort of like a direction, right? Of like you, we all have our own experiences, but we're kind of looking towards the future in what we, and we're aligned in what we think is the, where things should move towards, even if we don't know how do we get there, right? But we can take a compassionate perspective. And I hope that that is what, when people listen to this, they will feel that from us, that there's no blame here. I'm not blaming anybody. If I want to blame somebody, I can blame myself, right? I was part of it too. I've been part of it too. So what do we do though? That's the question, right?
Yeah.
If it's nobody's fault, but it's still bad, what do we do about that? And that's, I think, the conversation that I want to have through this podcast.
Yep. I'm excited about it too, because I think with all of our shared experience and the years that we've been in and out of this industry, and even just what we've learned being outside of it and having the shared experience while we were all in it together, there's so much that we can help people get through, right? If you're going to stay in the industry, like I managed to pull together a few ways to lead compassionately, help leaders. I know one of the things that I think we all agree has been a huge problem in e-discovery operationally at the PM level is when you're a high performer, you're an A player and you're PM, and they're like nowhere to put you, and they end up putting you, to giving you responsibility to have others report to you and be a people manager. Is a hard job, right? People managing is just not something you give somebody because they were a great individual contributor. There is a heart mentality to that work that you have to be okay with and be and understand the responsibility, the serious responsibility you have to have someone's career in your hands and help mold them and guide them. And I know for myself, when I was leading, I didn't want people to enter that kind of relationship blind like I did. And I don't blame anyone for putting me in that situation. I wanted it, right? I wanted the challenge at some point in my career, but I didn't know what I was doing. And learning on the job is not cool. It's not like, when you're an attorney, Joe, I guess you can confirm this. I know you go to law school and really teach you how to be a lawyer, right? They give you principles and then you learn how to be a lawyer on the job. But there is no, pre e-discovery, right? There's no, to my understanding, there is no real course yet, or there are no real courses yet in any kind of undergraduate or graduate program to teach you how to be an e-discovery professional. There's just nothing. There's a bunch of different tools for specific, or I should say, courses on specific tools and principles and general project management, but there's just nothing out there that would prepare you for what this is. And so, maybe, between the three of us or among the three of us, we can help some people just learn from the benefit of our expertise and what we've in our experience. That's what I'm hoping to get out of this. Just help some people get through some things that so they don't have to go through the same kinds of suffering that I went through. And I don't say suffering lightly, right? I know we all. It's something that I don't think business owners really get. Like, I've been under my desk, thumb in mouth, panicked, can't get out of my, couldn't get out of my car one day. I was at a traffic light. I looked at my phone saw an email from a very, very interesting client, floored me. I don't remember getting home. I was 20 minutes away. I don't remember it. Don't remember the drive. That's dangerous. I've had panic attacks outside of my doctor's office. I've had all kinds of terrible stuff happen to me just because of this work, because I want to do a good job. And I don't know how I'm going to do it with all the eyes on, right? And all that pressure. It's not good. And over time, I did learn how to manage through it. I want to help people do that, like at least hear possibilities of how you can do it a little differently so that you can survive in it, and understand that you're not alone in the suffering that you're going through, and that it doesn't have to be your experience, long term. I think we can all help people, and that's all we want to really do.
Amen. Toast to you. Yep.
Yes.
That's it right there.
So yeah, you guys heard it. We're trying to start a movement, and that movement starts with you guys. So do you have stories? Do you have, I don't know, complex issues? Do you have just some food for thought? Do you want to share it with us? Do you want some feedback? You can do that anonymously. You can contact us via our website. You can also at sololinesisters.com. You can also hit each of us up on LinkedIn. We will absolutely protect your privacy, and but we want to help. This is our way of coming back and saying to all of you PMs out there, we got you. We know that sometimes it sucks, and we know that there's another way to do things that would meet the business needs, and also make you feel valued and understood and appreciated for what you do every day. So yeah, we're gonna do this. We're gonna start a movement, and so yeah, we hope you enjoyed this first episode, and make sure you stay tuned. Send this to your coworkers, have them connect with us, and we look forward to more discussions.
Thanks, y'all.
Our little outro dance.
Yes. Thank you, ladies.
Thanks. Having a real conversation about well-being in the e-discovery industry and in the legal industry generally has been a long time coming. Becky, Renee, and I are happy to be in a position to create space to have these conversations, to share stories, to share ideas, to share new perspectives, with the hope that we are planting the seeds of transformation towards greater well-being for everyone. We come to you from a place of love, from a place of care and concern for your well-being and for the well-being of everyone in the e-discovery industry. Whether this podcast reaches one person or thousands of people, our efforts will be worth it. If you have stories to share with us, or you're in need of support and you think we can help, please fill out the form linked in the show notes below. We want to hear from you. On behalf of Becky, Renee, and myself, thank you so much for listening to our first episode, and we'll see you in the next one.